The night was cold, and the town's air smelled of impending rain. Evan Fisher stood outside the rundown bar, tapping his foot with irritation. He always knew the day would come when he'd have to confront Carter Hale, but not like this, not with stakes this high. Evan had loathed Carter since they were kids. Carter, the golden boy, charismatic, rich, and always 2 steps ahead. Carter had the girl Evan loved, won every argument, and sabotaged his promotion at work. And it was Carter's underhanded dealings that eventually got Evan fired and nearly destroyed his reputation. To everyone in their small town, Carter Hale was untouchable. And to Evan, he was the enemy, the man who stole everything from him. But tonight, Evan was desperate. "How did you find me?" Carter asked, leaning lazily against his truck. His voice dripped with arrogance, that same smug tone that drove Evan mad for years. "Does it matter? I need your help," Evan said bluntly, jaw clenched. Asking Carter for a favor felt like chewing on glass, but there were no other options. Carter smirked. "Help? From me? What happened?" "Lose your pride along with that crappy job." Evan stepped closer, fists balled. "Listen, I don't care what you think. I know you've got connections. You can get me out of this mess." The mess, as Evan called it, was trouble with the wrong people. He'd borrowed money from a local loan shark named Troy to fix his sister's hospital bills. But the payments snowballed, and now Troy was coming to collect, along with promises to hurt his sister if Evan didn't pay by the end of the week. Carter took out a cigarette, lit it, and blew a thin stream of smoke into the night air. "Let me guess, you thought you could crawl out from under your rock and play hero? You were always in over your head, Fisher." Evan's eyes darkened. "Are you in or not? Because if you aren't, I'll find another way." Carter chuckled. "Relax, I'm in. But remember, this makes us even. No favors after this." Evan's lip curled. The idea of being indebted to Carter made his skin crawl. But a promise was a promise, even to a snake like Hale. The plan was simple. Carter knew Troy and had a way into his inner circle. They'd use that connection to negotiate Evan's debt, or, if necessary, threaten Troy into backing off. But what started as a straightforward scheme unraveled quickly. They met with Troy the next night in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was supposed to be a quiet meeting, a conversation. Instead, it ended in bloodshed. Troy wasn't interested in mercy, and his men weren't interested in negotiating. Things turned ugly fast. Shots were fired, fists thrown. Evan fought hard, but he wasn't prepared for the chaos. Just when it seemed like they were outnumbered, Carter pulled a knife from his jacket and buried it deep into Troy's side. The loan shark gasped, clutching his ribs as he collapsed. "You idiot," Evan hissed. "We were supposed to talk." Carter, breathing heavily, shot him a wild grin. "Relax, this was the only way." But things were far from under control. Troy's men lunged at them, guns drawn. They barely escaped the warehouse, bullets ricocheting around them as they fled into the night. By the time they reached Carter's cabin deep in the woods, Evan's hands were still shaking. Blood stained his shirt, some of it his, some of it Troy's. "You just made things worse," Evan spat. "You always make things worse. And you always think there's a clean way out," Carter snapped back. "You're too soft, Fisher. That's why you're always 2 steps behind." Evan wanted to scream, to punch Carter in the face, but he knew he couldn't afford to lose it. Not now. Carter's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and cursed under his breath. "We've got company." "What do you mean?" Evan demanded. Carter threw him a grim look. "Someone set us up. They knew we'd be there. We've been marked." Evan's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Carter nodded. "Troy was never the real problem. Someone bigger wanted you in that warehouse, and now that we're alive, we're targets." Evan's mind raced. Someone else was pulling the strings, and the 2 men, once sworn enemies, had just become pawns in a much larger game. There was no going back. With nowhere safe to go, Evan and Carter stayed off the grid, moving through the wilderness to avoid whoever was after them. As the days dragged on, they survived by scavenging, sharing supplies, and keeping watch in shifts. Something strange began to happen. They stopped fighting, or at least the arguments became fewer. Evan saw glimpses of a different Carter, a man who, despite his arrogance, knew how to survive under pressure. A man who, oddly enough, seemed almost loyal. They talked during the long nights by the campfire. Carter admitted he never meant to ruin Evan's life. It was just the way things worked out. "I had to be ruthless to get where I am," he confessed. "But I didn't realize how many people I'd burn along the way. You were just collateral damage." For the first time, Evan saw Carter as more than a villain. He saw a man who'd made mistakes, just like him. They learned that Troy's death had sparked a power struggle, Troy's second in command, a dangerous man named Mason, wanted both Evan and Carter dead, not just for revenge but to tie up loose ends. Carter revealed that Mason had once been his partner, and Carter had betrayed him to climb the criminal ladder. Now Mason was hunting them both. "It was never about you," Carter admitted. "Mason wanted me, you were just bait." Evan stared at him, rage bubbling under the surface. "So all of this, getting me involved, was just to save your own skin?" Carter didn't deny it. "At first, yeah, but things change." Evan stood, fists clenched, ready to walk away, but Carter grabbed his arm. "Look, I know I've been a bastard, but if we don't stick together, Mason wins, and trust me, you don't want to know what it does to loose ends." With no other options, Evan and Carter decided to confront Mason head-on. They couldn't keep running forever. Using Carter's knowledge of Mason's operation, they set a trap. They'd meet Mason in a neutral location and offer him a deal. Fake a truce to lure him into the open, then take him down. The meeting was tense, held in an old train yard under the cover of night. Mason arrived with a small army of men, guns drawn, but Carter had anticipated that. He had hidden explosives in the surrounding area, set to detonate if things went south. "Long time, Hale," Mason sneered. "I knew you'd come crawling back." Carter's grin was sharp, but there was no humor in it. "You've been waiting for this, haven't you?" Before Mason could respond, Carter detonated the first charge, sending a plume of fire into the sky. The explosion scattered Mason's men, and chaos erupted in the train yard. Evan fought like a man possessed. He took down 2 of Mason's thugs with a lead pipe, adrenaline fueling every swing. Across the battlefield, Carter held his own, moving with ruthless precision. For a moment, they fought side by side, not as enemies, but as allies. Carter, badly wounded, turned to Evan. "Go," he whispered. "This was always my fight. You can still walk away." Evan hesitated. Every instinct told him to leave Carter behind. It would be easy, poetic even. After everything Carter had done, it would be the perfect revenge. But something stopped him. "You're not dying today, Hale," Evan muttered, pulling Carter to his feet. "Not like this." Together they fought their way out, leaving Mason's operation in ruins behind them. Weeks later, Evan sat at a small cafe nursing a cup of coffee. Carter was gone, disappeared without a trace after their final battle. But Evan knew the truth. Carter Hale had redeemed himself in the end. No one in town understood why Evan no longer hated Carter. They whispered behind his back, speculating about what had happened between them. But Evan didn't care. He knew the truth. Sometimes your worst enemy becomes your only ally, and sometimes redemption comes from the strangest places. Thanks so much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this story, and share your ideas for future videos. See you in the next video.